At the beginning, when you look at the spectrum of the disease at diagnosis, there are 2 or 3 main determinants of the pathogenesis of sleep apnea. One is upper airway obstruction and obstructive sleep apnea related to a more narrow and more collapsible upper airway. And the second one is unstable respiratory control, as we have in central sleep apnea related to some different contexts, fluid shift, cardiac failure, microarousals. And in some patients, you have a coexisting situation with collapsible upper airway and unstable respiratory control. And in this case, you can get what we call coexisting obstructive and central sleep apnea. So you can have, before treatment, pure obstructive sleep apnea, pure central sleep apnea, and some in-between situation with coexisting central and obstructive. When you try to treat these people with CPAP, you have in the majority of the cases a normalization of respiratory events. You have some patients with treatment-emergent central sleep apnea. And when you went from CSA or coexisting CSA or OSA, you can have persistent central sleep apnea under CPAP or transient central sleep apnea with a decrease in the number of central events during the course of central sleep apnea. This is an example, and this clinical case is illustrating the pathophysiology and the difficulty to characterize appropriately this patient. This patient is exhibiting typical obstructive hypopneas. You can see typical obstructive hypopneas, and you have a summary of oxygen desaturation during the night. We are in this part, we are in non-REM sleep, and transcutaneous PCO2 is in the normal range. And during the last quarter of the night, you have a completely different pattern, and you can see very typical central events. You have a decrease in PCO2, and you have even more severe oxygen desaturation. So this is a very nice example of coexisting central and obstructive sleep apnea. And in this condition, it's difficult to anticipate what is going to occur when you treat with CPAP. This figure is summarizing the situation. You can see that when you have normal PCO2 during the night, you have mainly obstructive events. When you have hyperventilation with low CO2, and especially in supine position, you have typical central sleep apnea. So hypercapnia, body position, and quality of sleep are probably key mechanisms for the occurrence of central or obstructive events in this kind of patient. The second question is treatment-emergent central sleep apnea. And this is a recent very good review summarizing the existing data. You can see different studies, and you can see that the prevalence of treatment-emergent central sleep apnea is from 5% to 20%, which is obviously a very huge difference. And in these low prevalences of emergent central sleep apnea, this prevalence has been established during full night titration study, using full night titration studies, and the very high prevalences of treatment-emergent central sleep apnea have been established in studies using mainly a sleep night study with a very rapid increase in pressures. So titration mode is probably influencing the prevalence of treatment-emergent central sleep apnea. You can see also in this figure that the prevalence is varying in function of the number of people included in the study. These studies with a very limited number of patients, you have very high prevalence, around 15 to 20%. In the larger samples, above 1,000, the prevalence is clearly low. So the quality, the overall quality of data we have available today is limited by the mode of titration and also the size of the study. So there are a lot of unresolved questions regarding the prevalence of emergent, persistent, transient central sleep apnea during CPAP therapy, and we need study with large samples, unbiased population, in the real-life population. And we do not need only one-night measurement during the titration study, but we need to establish trajectories of the evolution of central events during the first month of therapy, and telemonitoring is going to provide us with every night measurement of residual events, leaks, level of pressure, and we decided to work on this from day 1 to day 90. I just would like to say that this data are supported by ResMed unrestricted grant and support, but the data analysis I am going to present has been done with the participation of independent academic experts.